Wonders of modern technology.
It is. Well, we're live now. Anyone watching it on Facebook or YouTube, we were a little bit delayed, tech difficulties, but that happens. That's why when I'm speaking, I always take 2 laptops, 3 cables, a couple of different pointers, the whole thing. So, Darren, it's good to have you here, though, finally.
Very honored to be here, Cliff.
You're the man. We first met, I don't know exactly how many years ago. It was probably about 9 years ago now. And it's sort of an embarrassing Genesis tale because I was running a little workshop with Industrial Athletic. And I think we were both some of the early ambassadors for the Industrial Athletic brand and running a little workshop on kettlebells. And, it's one of those embarrassing situations where you're teaching and you realize that the guy you're teaching is probably more proficient at the stuff than you are.
Oh,
and so you got to get out of your way pretty quickly. But since then, obviously, we've got on and done a bunch of things together. And you told me a story the other day, which I thought was super interesting. I had envisaged that you had this really long, not that you don't, but you had this really long history in, sports and performance and all that kind of stuff. But you were telling me how it really wasn't that way. You sort of went from being your Kiwi everyman into getting into this stuff. So tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Yeah, I was just a really tiny kid. So, the classic New Zealand rugby pathway was not for me. Maybe it could have been if I had a little more guts, but I didn't. So I was too scared to get on the field. And I did gymnastics for a little bit. And that was my very early years. And then, not really a lot more besides a bit of martial arts. But you're not your classic sporty sort of stuff. And then my 20s, almost nothing at all. Traveling overseas, doing the sort of classic Kiwi OE backpacker thing. And really the only muscle I was exercising was my right bicep, to tip beer down my throat. So, but there was always a desire to be fit or to be healthier. Just really didn't know how to pursue it. And I often tell people at the nutrition lectures I give that my first conscious, memorable decision to get healthier was to stop eating pies and chips and to eat entire bags of jelly beans instead because there was no fat in them. But from small steps, right? From that was still a conscious choice to try to do something better, and just started to morph from there.
And so, how did it morph from there? Because you were in sort of orthodox academia, I guess, doing your bachelor's and master's degree first, and then you moved into CrossFit.
Yeah, well, we'd probably have to go back a step further. Just before university, was those continuous attempts to improve my own health. So it was all very self-researched. Once the interwebs was invented, then it was a lot easier to access that stuff. But I was Men's Health magazine for a while, and then Testosterone magazine.
Yeah,
that was actually where I really started to get access to to some. There's an interesting place, isn't it? There was a lot of very highly respected scientific researchers on that in the early days. Yet it was a complete meathead site. And I think I was lucky enough to get to that at the right time and really start to understand some stuff from, Poliquin and Berardi and people like that. And so that was self-educated. That's what led me to decide to go to university. So skipping ahead, that very classic sort of traditional training in university just didn't seem to be working with clients that I was working with. And I started working in the gym the day I joined, the day I started uni, started working in a gym. And I could just see it not working. I could see, everything that is wrong with the fitness industry seemed to be happening in the gym that I was at. And so it made me very curious and going on the fact that I'd, learned a lot of useful stuff myself already. I just kept searching. And so that's when CrossFit kind of came across my radar.
So that early stuff that you were doing, given that you were reading, TMAG and publications like that, was that very much bodybuilding style training, or were you more sort of strength focused even back then?
Yeah, it was probably still more strength focused. It just intuitively made more sense to me. And I think I just plain wanted to be stronger. My very first exposure to weight training was when I was 16, and that was very bodybuilding-esque. And it's also where I encountered my first injuries. So I think I was looking for a more real, holistic kind of approach from the get-go. Like my mid-20s was when we're sort of talking. So yeah, there was always deadlifts, there was always squats. There was attempts at power cleans, but it took a wee while before those were anything I was proud of. Trying to learn the Olympic level out of a book is hard. Did you know that?
Yeah, well, tell me about it. When I first got into Olympic lifting, I think I was reading articles at the time by Christian Thibodeau and guys like that, and sort of trying to mimic what they were saying in their articles, and then I'd take it to my coach, and he'd just shake his head and go, "My dude, what are you doing?" Because I mean, some of it was probably incorrect according to his teaching methodology, but some of it as well was just missing in translation, trying to get from the text into your brain, which is pretty difficult to do.
Yeah.
But some of those magazines, I remember my first exposure to keto, and I only thought about this a couple of months back when I was giving a talk, sort of popped up. I thought it was through when I was studying, getting into higher protein diets and things like that, and doing research into the emerging, or looking at the emerging research, I should say, about higher protein diets at the time. But it wasn't. It was earlier than that. It was when I was a high school athlete, and I was reading an old Ironman magazine, and they were talking about this keto diet, and it appealed to me because they were saying, if you are following this particular diet and keeping your carbs really low, you can still have a beer at the end of the day and it won't sort of kick you out of ketosis. And that sounded pretty appealing to me. But super interesting that a lot of those magazines back in the day had legitimate bona fide experts. And you had, magazines like Iron Man, and then the more progressive one was Muscle Media 2000. That became probably a little bit different over time, and all the authors from there moved over to TMAG. And obviously that's changed a lot in the intervening through those magazines, because we don't have, the blogosphere that we now have. Don't tell me we've lost you again, Daz.
No,
are you still there? Good.
Still here. Sorry, just having some microphone difficulties. We're back.
That's all good.
Had to switch you. Hopefully it's not too distorted, but the earbuds have crapped out now, so we're having a good time today.
But you can still hear me.
I can still hear you.
Good. And everyone can still hear us, so we're still going along just fine. This is the nature of the business.
Yeah.
So then you've been called, and I know you don't like this, but you have been called the Godfather of CrossFit in New Zealand because you started the first CrossFit box in New Zealand, right?
Yeah. No, of course it's very flattering. It's when people get it wrong and call me the grandfather of CrossFit in New Zealand that I don't like it. But certainly
you're not far off, mate.
Yeah, feeling that way sometimes. But no, it's certainly it's much more of an honor than it is an insult or a jest. I bear that title gladly, and I do feel some responsibility, I guess, and some pride in the movement, if we're going to call it that, because we can't call it a cult, of course, although it is.
For some it is.
Yeah, I mean, I've had no idea of what was going to happen when we started. It just really resonated. And I tell people that the reason it's called CrossFit New Zealand was not to try to pin down the entire real estate, but because I didn't think anyone else was going to do the same. So it was as good a name as any, but we're up to 120 odd, 130 odd CrossFit gyms around the country.
Yeah, I mean, is it still growing, or has it sort of plateaued now, do you think?
It's definitely leveled off. But I don't really keep track of it. It's leveled off, but some gyms close, some gyms sell, others open. So it seems to be ticking along. And then there's the CrossFit-esque gyms, functional fitness, the franchise ones, F45, Orange Theory, that sort of thing. So you could argue that if CrossFit's plateaued in New Zealand, the style of training is going from strength to strength.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing that we see now, is that growth in, I guess, what people used to call functional fitness, although I think that term's fallen into disrepute as well now. But how do you think that whole culture of cross training and functional fitness has changed the fitness landscape?
Massively is really all I can say. We've taken an entire population of people that used to do machine-based weight training and treadmill and elliptical trainer cardio, steady state style, to very high intensity, mixed modal type movements, and intervals, lots of lactate work, just going to a place they've never gone before. And I think that was a big reason for its initial success. I think there was a real missing component in most people's in their training, like filling the gaps. So you had sort of very, very mid-range rep strength training, but no one was really getting strong. And I'm painting broad strokes here. And then that steady state cardio, no one was really getting much kind of metabolic capacity either. So CrossFit, it suddenly gave this incredible fitness to the average person. It was absolutely a game changer. Of course, what's happening now is people have given up steady state aerobic work and bodybuilding style isolation work, which were great complements to high intensity stuff. And now all they're left with is very high intensity work, which potentially offers its own problems. Okay. Now that's not CrossFit's fault. I'm always quick to say it's the way that many people interpret what CrossFit is, and they just don't quite vary it enough, because the fun stuff is the hard, intense stuff, and so that's what tends to get done the most.
Yeah, you make a good point, and I hadn't thought about it in that way before. We often think about, CrossFit being a type of exercise that incorporates different modalities, and that was appealing to people, and they became involved with it. It sort of rode the wave, I guess, of an emerging functional fitness movement in fitness in general. But you make a really good point in that people began to focus on the performance outcomes rather than just putting in their time at the gym. And I think that's what a lot of people were doing, apart from those who were in the sort of niche sects of powerlifting, bodybuilding, whatever. Most people going to the gym are putting in time because they should, they know they've got to put in a certain amount of time, do some bodybuilding, maybe do some steady state cardio to try and achieve this thing of health. And one thing that blew me away when I first started working with CrossFit athletes, not that I've done a lot, but I've done a little bit, was that they were really focused on learning skills and improving these very interesting aspects of performance. And that blew me away, because that wasn't really something that was done apart from in, truly legitimate athletes who are working towards a particular goal. And I think that's changed the whole landscape of training probably more than anything else.
Yeah, it was, it's a crazy thing to think about. We stopped telling people that they needed six packs, or stop them thinking that was important, and instead turn the focus to how fast can you run, how high can you jump, how much can you lift, how many reps can you do. And I think that really took a lot of pressure off people. It's such a vanity based industry.
And how many six packs were built because of that?
And that's the funny side of it. And it's exactly how I would explain it to people. I would say, we don't focus on the six pack. It just becomes a lucky or a welcome side effect of focusing on performance. It's certainly, I think, a healthier way. Like anything, it can be taken too far, and you see it now in the competitive side of it. And people that maybe should not be competing who are tied up in the performance side of things. but yeah, I still think it's a much healthier focus to think about. You just mentioned it then, like the desire to learn new skills. That's the stuff that I love. People coming to me with a desire to learn new skills and to get better at them. And so that is certainly a performance metric. But chasing performance at the expense of health is as bad as chasing aesthetics at the expense of health. And we've kind of been seeing both of those going on for a while now.
And so do you see that as being a challenge, a major challenge in CrossFit, is that people aren't so focused on health anymore? Or is that something that's always been there?
I think it's more recent. It's certainly, as I said, I wouldn't blame CrossFit. I would blame the games a little bit. And this is coming from games athlete. I love the sport of fitness, but it's a different kettle of fish. It's a sport as opposed to a health movement. And many people who practice CrossFit, many coaches who coach CrossFit, many owners who own CrossFit gyms are heavily swayed by CrossFit games and performance above all else. And I'm my part as the Godfather is trying to swing the level back to health. Dare I say a little bit of aesthetics, because ultimately improved body composition equals improved health and confidence and all that sort of stuff. The performance is still there. It's just getting that balance right.
So how do you work to get that balance right for your members?
It's always tough, and I'm still working on it, but effectively it means that we don't glorify being absolutely smashed at the end of every single workout.
No more, what was it? Pukey the Clown.
Yeah. But hey, that's a different kind of capacity. That's sort of your lactic power. You've got to go there, right? You've got to feel a bit pukey to have capacity in that kind of domain. And athletes who have the potential to go there, have the capacity to go there, then we do it. But, for my 60-year-old clients who've never really exercised formally in their life, they do not need a 1-minute air bike sprint for max calories. They're not even going to enter the lactate shuttle. They simply can't produce that kind of power output. Far better off for them that they're getting steady state aerobic work and simple single limb strength training. So it's more about who it's appropriate for. And just again, because typically in a CrossFit gym, we deliver it in a group setting. The people that need, what most people need, they're not always getting what they should be getting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just try to vary the intensity. That's more than anything. The catchphrase of CrossFit is constantly varied functional movement executed at high intensity. But if you slip the word relative in there, executed at relatively high intensity relative to the individual, it's a perfect description. Just that intensity at that high intensity just gets sort of misinterpreted a little bit. And as often means that every single day is a smash fest, and the body just can't cope with that.
Do you think that the lower intensity work, or perhaps more correctly, it would be sort of rehab and restorative work, do you think that's come into CrossFit and functional training in general more recently, or is that a thread that's always been there? It's just that maybe people are paying a bit more attention now.
Oh, it's definitely more recent, and people are paying more attention because they're starting to feel the effects of this hard training. There's companies, there's experts that are sort of putting their hands up and talking about this sort of stuff. So it's really good timing, if that it's aligned. I think a lot of it's to do with the fact that 10 years ago smartphones didn't exist. We've completely changed a lot of our behaviors in such a really short time, and we're walking less, we're moving less, we're on our computers a lot more, and yet we're exercising harder than ever. For 1 hour, we're exercising harder than we've ever exercised, but for 23 hours, we're doing sweet F all.
Yeah.
I tell you myself how hard it is to get 10,000 steps on a daily basis, if I have a busy day coaching and I walk to the cafe, I might manage 8,000, and I've got to work really hard to get, just some basic movement.
Yeah.
So, I certainly try to add extra steady state cardio in, and on top of strength training or a CrossFit class, because it's just not enough, I think. So it's a funny kind of contradiction. I'm trying to get my clients to do more, but just not as hard. I need them moving more throughout the day, and I need them moving less intensely when they come to class.
Yeah. I've talked about that in workshops, in the framing of sort of just building your work capacity. And the only way you can build your work capacity is to actually start at a very low intensity or low volume. I gave the example, I think, when I spoke to Mickey, of I went out for a run a few months back, and I haven't run much recently, and I probably did 3K, and it obliterated me for a week. My legs were just completely annihilated, and I'm relatively fit in a cardiovascular sense, but just to go out and pound the pavement, couldn't do it. So I would have been better off starting with a ridiculously small amount of exercise, maybe even a 1 minute jog around the block, and then building by maybe a minute a day until I was actually getting some volume in, because I think we've got to start at a very, very low intensity in order to just encourage the body to adapt without smashing it.
Exactly. And, it used to be trial by fire. Try a class. Then I'd stand over you while you're lying on your back, ask you how you like that. And if you liked it, come back tomorrow and we'll do it again. I'm not going to pretend that I, knew what I was doing from the start. We certainly figured it out by trial and error. And, but I could see very early on, if I'm going to take any kind of credit, it was that I saw it very early on that the majority of people didn't like getting their asses handed to them straight away. And it was nothing to do with being weak or soft or anything like that. It was just a heck of a shock. And it's potentially dangerous. So now I talk to a prospective client. We can't prove anything with one workout anyway. If you come back to that constant variance, one workout of potentially 1,000 different ones, there's just no need to kind of roll the dice like that with someone.
Yeah.
And every time I've tried to kind of guesstimate someone's fitness, I've been wrong. Oh, okay. I know I said 5 rounds, but you know what? We're just going to do 3 because you look really good. I'll say something really nice to them. You're looking really good. That's all we need to do. But it's because I can see they're about to drop dead.
Yeah.
So now it's chat, and then it's steady state aerobic work and basic strength training until we get a good idea of that person's capacity. We'd be doing them a disservice otherwise. That's what I think about it now. Is again that 10-year journey. People are just in worse shape on average than they ever have been, and they just don't need to be thrown into a high intensity setting, let alone with complex movements. So I believe we're one of the best service-based businesses out there. We're doing a lot for people, and it's our duty to make sure they're looked after. And a few sessions one-on-one where we just make sure that everything works right, their posture's correct, that they've got a bit of balance, and they have some sort of capacity, and that we build a little bit through those sessions before they jump into group class. Which ultimately why CrossFit is so successful is the group setting. And so we're not trying to take that away. It's a lot of fun working out with other people. We just take a little longer to get people to that point. We make them earn it, I guess. But not in a Fight Club way. We just want to build a bit of basic capacity so that they can be safe, so that they can enjoy themselves. And it seems to be working out pretty good. We've got average membership well over 3 years, which is I think twice the national average, and something like 65-year members, and we've got a whole host of members that we're starting to award 10-year awards to as well. And
wow.
I just don't think that people could exercise that hard for that long if we weren't moderating it somewhat.
Yeah. And yeah, I want to return to that idea of community, but I think what you mentioned about the intensities and doing steady state and then having your, I guess, strength and skill based work, that's very, very similar to a lot of coaches I've talked with recently who really have this idea, myself included, of almost like bookending exercise where the priorities are strength with relatively low volume and high intensity, but well within capacity for the individual, and then just residual exercise to build work capacity and all the other various benefits. And then in the middle range is where we need to be more circumspect based on the recovery ability of the person, because that's, you know, that high intensity, high volume type stuff is where people really get smashed. So it's interesting that a lot of people have come to the same types of conclusions, I guess, basically just from being in the fire with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Constant. Every time I go to a competition, I'm talking to an owner or a coach or an athlete who's just coming to that realization, you know, and whether it's, I can't do this anymore, I'm injured, I can't do this anymore, I'm burned out, I'm losing the enjoyment of exercise. All these things are starting to happen to people. And that's the thing. For some of our, you know, deconditioned people who've never experienced this stuff before, it'll take them 2 months and they're done. For people who love it, it might take them 2 years, it might take them 4 years, but they're done as well. It's just hard to keep coming in and slogging your guts out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's the thing. Strength's always the priority for us. And then it's, just building that capacity from the low end, from the aerobic side of things, and just moving it up. And we move it up as far as that person can handle, I guess, in the sense of what they need, what they're capable of doing. But yeah, it's either ends of the spectrum, certainly, where I think we win the battle. Caveman, you know, he's walked after game for 3 days, and then he ran out and stabbed it. So
exactly.
He sprints and he walks. He doesn't run at a really fast pace for 2 hours.
No.
You know? And that's that marathon mentality. It's not really where we're supposed to live.
Yeah.
And that glycolytic system, you know, like obviously we're not exercising for 2 hours, but that glycolytic system is kicking in from, you know, around that 10-minute mark at a reasonably high intensity. So that's the one we're hammering with a lot of that classic Metcon type stuff.
Yeah. It's an interesting point, because given that, you know, as you've said, we were attrition hunters, and that was our advantage because we didn't overheat, unlike our prey would overheat and they'd eventually have to stop. But that involved, like you say, it was extremely slow jogging or mostly walking for long periods of time. And most people who are pretty well conditioned and are structurally pretty well put together can actually go out and walk for incredible distances without it being too much of a strain. As soon as you start to put greater load through by jogging or running, that's when you obviously have to be attenuated to it. But it goes to show that structurally we're very well developed for that, of just, you know, that long, residual, very slow stuff interspersed with sprinting, killing, dragging, climbing, all that kind of stuff.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So, it's a survival thing, right? It was too energy costly to run fast for a long time. And we don't have any problems now with energy acquisition. But, you know, that's also a problem in its own right. There's, this might be a bit of a controversial statement, but there's some chubby CrossFitters out there. And I'm not being a fattest, but what I mean is there's a lot of people whose body composition is suffering because they are thinking that they've earned the right to eat and drink what they like. And I've been in that boat as well. You know, I'm not as lean as I was 10 years ago. And some of that's to do with I'm probably fine to make this choice because of the exercise that I do. And it's, you know, it just doesn't actually work that way forever. If you're 20, sure.
I wonder, I remember I wrote an article many years ago on the chubby CrossFitter, and it probably wouldn't fly now. I think if I published it again, I'd be strung up. But one of the points I played with, and I don't necessarily believe it, but I think it's interesting to think about, is that I think some athletes in CrossFit or CrossFit-like sports that are smashing themselves with very high volumes of high intensity activity and who need to also fuel that and end up slipping into maybe some poorer dietary habits because they're just trying to get the fuel in.
Yeah.
They're basically in an extremely high stress situation with extremely high residual cortisol all the time, and they're eating pretty poor food. It's not the perfect situation for having optimal body comp anyway.
Exactly.
So you think that's actually potentially a thing?
I really do. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't go around sort of observing everyone's body composition as I walk through a competition, but it's just a general feeling that that abdominal fat. I don't know. Yeah. So I'm feeling a bit judgy already talking about it, but if we change the concept from chubby CrossFitter to less than optimal health CrossFitter, of which body composition is a factor, right?
Yeah.
So these people they're very inflamed, highly stressed, poor digestion, low nutrient intake, as in micros, high energy intake, and certainly a high energy output, and which equals all the cortisol. So
yeah,
it's a very interesting situation to be in, and there's a classic sort of graphic in CrossFit called the sickness, wellness, fitness curve, and if you imagine a half circle with sickness on one side, fitness on the other side, and wellness at the halfway point, it talks about the fact that most encouragements around fitness and health are toward wellness, which is really only a half measure, and that being fit, which is according to this graph, better, gives you a buffer, and you have to backslide all the way through wellness just to become sick. And I've always liked it. It just meant you should be searching for more than wellness.
Yeah.
However, if you start drawing that circle around and completing the circle, that's when you're moving into sport and competition. And now you're only 90 degrees away from ending up back at sickness again, which manifests itself in, acute injury, chronic injuries, and more of these other things we're talking about, trouble maintaining body comp, inflammation, gut issues, that sort of thing. And I think that's where a lot of people, who have prioritized the sport of CrossFit or the sport of fitness, they've started to complete that circle back towards sickness again. And, we know this in any professional sport, that they're often on a razor's edge in that regard anyway. It's nothing new.
No.
The thing is, it's become a new thing for a population of people who maybe don't have the support around it.
Yeah.
The weekend warriors.
Yeah. And I guess in just so that people don't string me up too much, in my experience of that situation, it was predominantly with athletes who were actually very high level CrossFitters who were also high level in other sports, like maybe other strength sports or in, combat sports, and were trying to make weight in those other sports, and were finding they were very resistant to losing body fat. Now, they weren't necessarily, what we would consider over fat by any means, but to get to the level of leanness that was required by the other sport was incredibly difficult. And I think a lot of it was just because of that residual stress and overtraining, overreaching that they were probably, experiencing as a result of all the CrossFit work, and backed up with maybe poor nutrition.
Yeah, it's just too much, right? And their sport, sorry, I'm just relocating to a power source.
It's all good.
Their sport was in that glycolytic pathway. And then they're adding more glycolytic work.
Exactly.
So
it's just overload, and then they become very resistant to fat loss.
Yeah.
So when you're working, because you work a lot with not just your, I guess, general recreational CrossFit athletes, but you also work with a lot of high-level CrossFit athletes as well. Mm-hmm. How do you monitor and adapt those types of training programs or nutrition plans for those higher-level guys to guys and gals to basically meet those recovery requirements? How do you know when they're potentially getting into that place of overreaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. I tell you what, I really had to rethink my ideas on carbohydrate. I didn't promote low carbohydrate, but I was resistant to the amounts of carbohydrate that some other experts were pushing in the sport. But the fact is that the volume of work required in the sport at its highest level now, it's basically endurance exercise in terms of the amount of carbohydrate required. So I've admittedly changed my tune a lot, and you and I have spoken before about this, about sort of what's been proven in the literature to be sort of optimal or recommended carbohydrate intakes. However, in practice, athletes aren't getting it because it's simply so high. They're falling short. They're just trying to do the best they can, and so that's often the case when it comes to competition. Is I'm literally trying to help them do the best they can to get enough fuel and to literally survive the weekend or the week, because the demands are so great. So really emphasizing that. So what really that means is we put a lot more emphasis on trying to eat as healthy as possible outside competition. And then, when it's the weekend, they basically go to war, and they might get a decent breakfast and a decent dinner. And then they're living on, branched chain amino acids and sports drink in between.
Yeah.
And just getting it, just shoveling it down in as much volume as they can to do the work.
Yeah.
And then it's straight back on to, all the greens and getting that inflammation down in real food and that sort of thing as soon as possible.
Did you find that because when I first became aware of CrossFit, it was very much wrapped up with the zone. Mm-hmm. And then it sort of changed. Tell me if I'm wrong here, but then it sort of went more towards sort of paleo primal. But I found that a lot of CrossFit athletes started going to the extreme ends of that, where they were low carb and keto. Mm-hmm. Where is that now? Do you think that's changed, or do you think for recreational CrossFit athletes in particular, they're still very much low carb and keto biased?
It's an interesting one. As far as I'm aware, CrossFit themselves are still more in the zone camp. And without trying to speak for them, I think it's just because it's good middle ground. It is a good starting ground. It's still probably 20% less carbs than the average Westerner is eating. And so it's still a lower carb diet. And it's putting an emphasis on protein. It's not demonizing fat. So it often does a really good job to get people started who have absolutely no idea. But, the general public now is a little bit more aware and self-educated. And they're already, that's the thing. They're already sort of looking up keto and low carb and primal online. And, again, 10 years ago, zone was revolutionary. Now people are, they're looking at different options, but I don't know if that's a better or a worse thing. Certainly information overload and paralysis by analysis and all that. But, if you get someone on the zone, if they're at absolute rubbish sort of quality of diet, they're going to be in a better place. And from there, we just start, titrating it down or adjusting it as we see fit.
Yeah. I think so. Some of the challenges with keto and CrossFit, from my point of view, come down to two things. It's basically it's the volume of the athlete. Because, I know we've discussed this a lot. A recreational CrossFit athlete who's going 2 or 3 times a week to the box is a vastly different proposition to someone who's competing and is maybe training 2 or 3 times a day. Yeah. The other thing I think is a misunderstanding of keto and low carb. And I see this all the time. I see it in scientific publications. I see it in magazines and blogs, whatever. There are these arbitrary ideas that people have of, to be keto or be low carb, you have to be under 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 grams of carbohydrate. But none of that is actually realistic when we take into account the volume of an athlete, whether they're a recreational athlete or not. Because if they're doing large volumes, not only can they tolerate, but they're using and they benefit from more carbohydrate, whether or not they're keto, low carb, zone, whatever. It doesn't really matter. So in some respects, I kind of think we'll find the nutrition style that works really well for you as a baseline because of behavioral factors or physiological factors or whatever. and then increase the carbs to meet your performance.
Exactly. That's it. And yeah, so your average CrossFitter, they should do much better on a lower carb intake. But as training increases, as intensity increases, volume, they're potentially going to have to boost that up a little bit. And then it's also taking into account, where they train, what they're getting. If they are turning up to a CrossFit gym that is regularly, dishing up these big, long, nasty, glycogen depleting workouts, they may have trouble. They might have a bit more trouble trying to adapt to any kind of lower carb diet, at least in the interim. And that's often the case. People jump in boots and all, and they go keto and join a CrossFit gym, and or an F45 or a boot camp, and particularly those other ones I mentioned. Those tend to be higher intensity for longer, and so even more depleting than your average CrossFit class. And so it's often not a good mix.
Yeah, and I think with the sort of hierarchy idea that we were talking about before, I don't have anything against people moving. I think if they want to do a particular type of activity, exercise, whatever, all power to them. But to me, it doesn't make sense with the priorities or the hierarchies of what's most important if the only thing that people are doing is getting out and twice a week just hammering themselves for 45 minutes. Because I would rather that person goes for a 20-minute walk every day.
Yeah.
And then maybe works in a couple of sets of start with some push-ups and some body weight squats to get some, movement patterning, resistance, strength, skill coming in.
Yeah. You know what though, Cliff?
What's that?
Fun. It's no fun.
I know. This is the problem though.
And you're by yourself, and this is the dilemma. The best exercise is boring.
Yeah. And the best nutrition is boring.
Yeah. And,
which is why you and I are never going to be best-selling nutrition authors, because we're too pragmatic.
Well, there'd only be 2 pages in my nutrition book, I think.
Yeah, you're more pragmatic than me.
No, you certainly do your best. But that's the thing is, that's why group exercise is so successful. I see that, and so my efforts are certainly to find a way to get the best out of the group environment, which is the motivation, the social connection, which is a huge one.
Yeah.
And is more important than ever. You talked about happiness in the show title, being around people. It's number one. It's right up there. And so that's where it's really important. And so that's what I'm mindful of. I believe in the group model, but maybe for other reasons. And then if we can find the best way to deliver the best exercise for the greater good, or the greater amount of people, and give them the greater good. Not sure I'm getting that right. Do the best I can in that environment though. Ideally everyone's on their own program, doing their own thing. But that's more expensive. It takes up more space. It's harder. So can we achieve it in a group environment? That's what I'm trying to do.
And I've begun to think that, well, for a long time, I've thought that, the perfect training plan is kind of bullshit anyway. Because at the end of the day, I see strength coaches all the time who are supposedly the latest and greatest, and they work with all these amazing athletes. I really wonder if that amazing athlete was working with another strength coach who is pretty damn good, they'd probably be just as good.
That'd be just
because at the end of the day, you get strong, you get powerful. You basically can do that with the basics and the fundamentals. So by extension, I wonder, if everyone is so obsessed with individualizing and, quantifying for them, finding the perfect training, the perfect nutrition, they're often, I think, focused on the wrong stuff, because what's more important is just getting it done. And I think if you can get it done within a community, I think what we're realizing now is having community and real connection is probably the biggest thing you can do for your mental health. And that's probably our biggest social challenge, is that people are not that happy anymore.
Yeah.
And CrossFit's done a great job of that.
Heck yeah. They might not be smiling in the middle of a workout, but they're always smiling after.
Well, never in my life had I seen, like, I was kind of resistant, as you well know, I was quite resistant to CrossFit back in about 2006, 7, when I first became exposed to it. I changed my tune very quickly when I started working with CrossFit athletes and realized just how committed they were to learning strength as a skill. But then when I saw boxes, which are businesses, you know, these are for-profit enterprises, and people were showing up in their free time to help paint the gym and lay down mats and all this kind of stuff. And I've seen it boxes around the world. I was thinking, this is crazy for someone to basically help your business to succeed and pay you for the honor of doing it. That shows they're getting something a whole lot more out of it as well.
It's something special, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I mean that's community, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And some, like, where I've been sort of talking about lately is that every CrossFit gym, and I'm not going to say good, bad, or anything like that, but any CrossFit gym of any quality, caliber, experience, they've got a great community. And so where I'm trying to go, I guess another layer is in the culture. So, community is the people, and they're going to come and go. That, there's no guarantees that people stay forever, although we're working on it. But people come and go, coaches come and go. So that's your community, but the culture is the way that community behaves.
Yeah.
And so keeping that culture strong, keeping those values really high, from the simple things like saying hello to new people, to mopping the floors, to, as you said, people that are prepared to come in on their time off and help maintain the gym. They help each other move house. They house sit for each other. They look after each other's pets. They babysit. That's the culture, and that's special stuff. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And it's cool that people are doing that with a focus on movement, gaining skills, nutrition, all these various holistic things.
Exactly. Which is another cultural thing in the sense of coming back to exercise being boring. We've got people that are now starting to go, okay, I get it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm ready to work at it. I'm ready to I've got the patience. I'm going to demonstrate some, patience to get there. And we've talked about it. We've compared this a lot to jiu-jitsu in conversations as well. There's suddenly, it's happened in the jiu-jitsu world. It's the same as CrossFit. There's this resurgence of people who are prepared to put in the time.
Yeah.
As hard and as uncomfortable and as slow as it may be, they understand that that's how you get true fulfillment and find some purpose and get genuine, lasting results. So yeah, it's a special time, but it's hard. It's not as good as the flashy stuff,
Well, interestingly, I think what maybe CrossFit and other modalities like that, and what you see in martial arts as well, what they've basically stumbled upon without realizing it is they've gamified exercise.
Yeah.
Because if you're learning to do something and you achieve it, that's so much different to going and sitting on a bicep curl machine where there's no option for you not to achieve it. I mean, then you are truly just putting in reps, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's pretty clever without being clever.
Yeah. That gamification was fantastic. And as I said, now, the companies that are coming around now are perhaps gamifying data points that aren't as necessary, just focusing purely on heart rate or calories burned, things like that. So it can be taken the wrong way. Certainly, gamification of skill acquisition is where it's at. Even kilos on the bar is finite, right? Because I'm in my 40s now. Can I actually get any stronger? Possibly in some things, but that's going to start to dwindle. So what's the purpose of strength training for me anymore if I can't have any more wins? So I'm more focused on improving movement quality, learning more technical lifts. Maybe I can improve my 5RM instead of my 1RM. Maybe I can improve my 10RM instead of my 5RM. Play around with some Cliff Harvey specials, one-handed deadlifts and overhead anyhows and, Zercher squats, and just get a little bit freaky so that I can still enjoy improvement.
I think something that comes to mind that I've really enjoyed recently is I used to be really fixated on strength. So basically everything I did was under about 5 reps.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had another ancillary goal, like I was trying to put on a bit of muscle at the same time, then I'd obviously increase the volume of that to try and elicit that hypertrophy. But recently, and I think I have to thank guys like Eric Helms and his buddies for sort of opening the doors a little bit to higher reps again through some of the research that's been done. I figured that there's no reason why I can't do higher rep work. So I've gone back to, 20 and 30 rep squats and just trying to build my load with those reps, or 20 or 30 rep overhead press, things like that. And it feels really good for the aging body to not always be under excessive loads.
Yeah.
It's almost as if you warm up within the set. It's still very challenging.
Yep. I've been doing a lot of the same stuff. And yeah, I've seemed to recall reading a bit of research that's suggesting that sort of classic, rep continuum is not as dyed in the wool as it may have been thought to be. It's that you can build strength and muscle in any rep range.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, a certain amount of repetitions are probably required within a time frame, let's say over a week.
Yep.
And as long as your load is also increasing incrementally over time, then you're basically going to get bigger. And I've certainly noticed that. I think I'm the biggest I've been in years. And it's most of my reps at the moment are between 20 and 30.
Sweet pump.
I mean, it's just all pump.
Love it.
But part of that as well is because I find my joints get a little bit beaten up because I'm an old man now doing jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned jiu-jitsu. Is that the next step for you as well, to start learning some skill in that space, or is that something you're just playing around with?
I've been trying. It's certainly something I'd like to get back into. Definitely. If I said that I had a sport, I spent most of the longest period of time was in martial arts during my teens. And so there's certainly, I guess I could consider myself a martial artist at heart, and I've always wanted to find my way back to it. But yeah, looking for something with a little bit more meaning and purpose, and jiu-jitsu ticks those boxes. So I've been having the odd lesson, but I haven't managed to get into a regular practice yet. So I might have to come and see, was it lunchtime classes you were getting along to?
I go in the morning. I'm terrible later in the day.
Yeah, I might have to come and see if I can hang with you once or twice. I got to find a home.
Come along, we'd love to have you.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean I want to wrestle with you, because I think it'd be like wrestling a bear, but we'll see.
I still remember one of my first lessons ever. This was years ago. Some tiny little guy. And he just kept saying to me, you're so strong, as he basically just manhandled me around the floor.
Yeah.
He was complimenting me while he was dismantling me. So
yeah.
I know there's a lot more to it than just strength. But that's again what appeals, the chance to keep learning and keep growing, for sure. And that's, that's something we really push within our community is to use the fitness that you're developing in the gym to do other stuff outside. And prior to CrossFit Games, that was what we did. We entered marathons and trail runs, and the Coastal Challenge run, which is, starts up your way and comes all the way down, like just slogging through the sand and around the river mouths and following the coast the whole way down to Devonport. Spartan races, Tough Mudders, all that stuff. That's where you sort of really know that you're fit.
Yeah, definitely.
Getting fit to, and again, this is not me bagging CrossFit as a sport, because it was my sport and I loved it and I still love it. But I certainly enjoy testing myself in other areas now. Thinking about doing some paddleboard racing this summer, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, and I got roped into the Coast to Coast to do the cycle legs, which is next February. So I'm on a team for that. So, yeah, so got a few different things going on.
So is this, again, all these different things you're doing, is this to stay fresh and just to stay motivated, or is there sort of a reason outside of that to move in different ways and to sort of keep your body healthy?
Yeah, I think all of the above. It's certainly coming back to that longer aerobic stuff. trying to get out on the mountain bike more, trying to get on the paddleboard more, trying to get out hiking more. I love an ocean swim, although I'm not very good at it, but that's all right. Yeah, you talked about, not being beat up. That seems to help. And as I said, our programming within the gym has evolved a lot anyway. So, I'm not trying to alleviate the stress of the training I'm doing in the gym, because I would like to think that that's already evolved enough that it's not causing the kind of stress that maybe it used to in the old days. But also I'm not training for CrossFit Games or anything like that. So the volume of weight training, of conditioning work that I do is a lot lower. But ultimately, man, New Zealand's a beautiful country. If you're not outside in it, using your own body to locomote around it, it's just, it's a bit of a waste.
Yeah.
But I like running trails because I get to go places and see things that I wouldn't otherwise, Sometimes you get access to private farm, private land, with some of these organized races. It's pretty incredible.
It always used to blow me away when I lived in Vancouver that I had an office at our gym, and I, did my nutrition there, but I strength coached at our local gym as well. And people would drive in from the suburbs to walk on the treadmill.
Yeah. It's great.
I just thought, with the beauty that was around Vancouver, just go for a fucking walk, man.
Go for a walk in the bush.
Yeah. Hey, so Daz, I'm always fascinated by your Instagram feed and your, the stuff you post up to Facebook on the CrossFit page and things like that, on the recovery and restorative work you do. Now, looking in from the outside, it seems like you have a real focus on that. And it seems to me, I'm getting straight, being honest here, it seems like it would be quite overwhelming for me to think about all those various things. But is that something that you use in lieu of training, or do you just do restorative work as part of what you do? And if so, what sorts of daily things do you do for that recovery and repair?
That's another good question, Clifford. I think there's multiple answers to that. One is we talked about trying to get those steps in. So for me, it's a version of getting steps.
Okay.
But if I don't have the opportunity to sort of go for a walk, then some sort of circuit of bear crawls and kettlebell swings and Turkish get-ups, that's going to be my walking that day. But of course, I might wager it's even more productive, right? Because I'm hitting more corners, I'm moving through a bigger range of motion. It's more enjoyable. I still find it hard to just enjoy walking. I'm working on it. So that's good. But yeah, it helps me recover from harder workouts. And dare I say, perhaps it's a sneaky way to build capacity to do well at those harder workouts. Most people, let's say they're training 3 times a week at a CrossFit gym and they want to do more. Their next step is to do a 4th CrossFit class, right? Which is 33% increase on volume. And that's just likely to be too big a jump. But what if they did a steady state bike, or went for a swim, or even a light jog, or added in a circuit like I'm talking about as their 4th session, and did that until it felt like they could cope with it. And then maybe they took that away and replaced it with the 4th CrossFit class. Then they added it back in again. Now we're at 5 sessions, but we're now increasing our we're increasing that by 10%, let's say, rather than that 30 odd. So yeah, it's just skill acquisition. It's a way to sort of practice more skilled movement in a lower intensity environment. So I get better at moving when I move slower.
And it's obviously very much within your capacity. You're using what are for you relatively light weights, and
exactly. It's moving meditation at its best. It's very mindful movement.
Yeah, I do that a lot with the clubs and with the sledgehammer. Just cyclical movements, keeping it really light. 1 or 2 kilo bells, and just for time.
Feels good.
Yeah. So more generally, do you have any anything almost like a checklist? Are there some things that you do each and every day that are kind of your non-negotiables?
That has varied. Used to have stricter routines, but I'm sort of getting back into it. But generally, I will try to do some kind of breathing. And I like just a milder one. When I wake up, I'll do something like box breathing, just some more controlled breathing, just to get going.
Is that for like 4 seconds?
Yeah, say 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold, or something like that. Stuff like Wim Hof was always a bit too aggressive for me. It used to sort of seem like it would just stir up the cortisol in the morning. So just some focus on the breath, and then I would go through some sort of what I call a spinal floss. So just some basic core movements, cats and camels, down, up, dogs, some rotational work through the thoracic, just loosening up the spine and the hips. And if I do that, I'm pretty happy. And then, if on a perfect day, I would have time to go through 30 or 40 minutes of a more detailed kind of movement flow, which could be like some rowing and some bear crawling and some kettlebell swinging and some handstand holds, plank work, that kind of thing. Yeah. If I could start my day off with something like that every day, that would be pretty good going. But it depends on if I'm coaching early or I've got clients and things like that. But there's always some breathing and sort of movement that you do every morning. And to be honest, I would take that over a harder workout. And it used to be more like a fail-safe. Back when I was a little bit more regular with it, the idea was I got that low-intensity session in. Actually, I jokingly call it lifting, LIFT, low-intensity functional training. Yeah, I love when you told me about that the other day. So I lift in the morning, and then if I don't get to strength train with any sort of intensity later that day, like I had perhaps planned, stuff will get in the way. I don't feel too bad because I have lifted. I've done some movement. I've done some really quality movement. I don't feel that I've lost out. But if I manage to get that lifting session in the morning, and then later that day I do some heavy squats or some heavy deadlifts or some heavy presses and some sort of higher intensity conditioning work, then that's an even bigger win, and you don't use anything like heart rate variability to track your recovery or anything? I try to be a bit more intuitive personally. I'm actually not that fond of data at all. I know that's still, it helps. Of course it helps. But, there's a lot of studies that show that the best thing is when the coach says, how you're feeling to the athlete. That beats urine color and grip strength and HRV almost always. So that's how I tend to go. How do I feel? If I haven't a good sleep, I won't work out hard. If I haven't eaten well, I won't work out hard. I'll base it on that. Pretty famous coach in the CrossFit sphere, Coach Bergner, says something like, if the frying pan's hot, you should cook. So that's it. If you're feeling good, go for it. If it's the frying pan's a little cold, then be mindful. Yeah, that's a really good point. Recently, I've sort of fallen into a pattern of training twice a day. Mm-hmm. And I say that, but it's not really training, because I'll do jiu-jitsu in the morning. And then if I'm feeling good, I'll lift. Like, I'll lift pretty heavy. And if I'm not, I still lift, but it's either a lot lighter, or it's, club bell work, or it's mobility work, with some type of resistance. It could be sort of dive bomber push-ups and, up, down dog and things like that. Just basically moving through. But I find that having that additional movement later in the day has had enormous benefits for my mobility, my sleep, helping to sort of bring down some of that residual stress, because I typically do it at the end of the workday. Mm-hmm. So it's been interesting, because in the past, the reason I bring that up is in the past, I would have been inclined to, if I were training twice a day, my mindset would be training. So I've got to go hard. 2 hard sessions. Yeah, exactly. And if I couldn't go hard, I'd flag it. Yeah. Whereas now it's just, well, do something, but just move. Even if it's roll around on the floor for 10 minutes. Yep. Yeah. That comes all the way back to what we were talking about earlier, that we're just not getting, the acronyms NEAT and NEPA, that non-exercise activity. We're just not getting it. Yeah. And so it seems, I sometimes feel crazy that I'm recommending a lot of people start spending more time in the gym, and that's only if they can't get that outdoors time. But for example, come to a class and then come back in the afternoon and jump on a bike and pedal for 20 minutes and say hello to everyone and hang out again in a good community. Cycling in Auckland's pretty nuts, so it's not always the recommended option. But that's perfect world. They would go for a trail walk or run. They would do an ocean swim. They would go mountain biking. They would get on their paddleboard, something like that, and then some strength training. So what we're substituting in is things like these movement flows, steady state cardio, because remember, at the end of the day, what is the gym? It's pretending to work. It's pretending to hunt and gather food. And so, perfect world, we wouldn't have to need a gym, but that's what we're trying to emulate.
And so given all of those things we've discussed, if you had to pick one thing, if someone could only do one thing in each and every day, what would that be?
Shoot. That's a tough
I'm asking
one.
This question because Danny Lennon from Sigma Nutrition Radio asked me it on his podcast a couple of weeks back.
Now, that's interesting because I really believe that strength is where we should be prioritizing to get people healthy. But if we were doing something every day, it would be hard to just pick one strength movement unless we mix up the variety. And I'm trying to worm around the question here. So there's a part of me that's leaning to something like walking on a really rugged trail, to gather water. And I'm trying to mix some strength training in there. But ultimately having good movement, being able to locomote, being able to stand and walk around is probably going to help us live the longest. Definitely. It's not squats, it's not push-ups, but I would love to be able to have a second pick and one strength exercise and one aerobic. But I'd probably pick some kind of fairly tough, as in physical, not high intensity aerobic movement.
Well, I think if you had have asked me, I didn't say this entirely to Danny, but I sort of said part of it. If you had have asked me probably 10 years ago, I would have said something like deadlifts or cleans.
I also would have said the same thing.
If you asked me a couple of months back, I would have said meditation. And what I said to Danny the other week was going for a walk in nature. So it basically exactly what you said, because I think that encapsulates movement, posture, breath, uneven surfaces, and mindfulness. And plus the residual benefits of just being out in nature we know are so important for mental health anyway. So maybe if you did some deadlifts then went for a walk, you're getting the best of both worlds.
That's it. That is it. And we even though it's not quite the same thing, we end all our workouts at CrossFit NZ with a walk. We send everyone out the door just to get some fresh air. It helps to bring your heart rate down, just that gentle movement, just trying to switch them into that parasympathetic state as soon as possible. So unfortunately, again, today's day and age, people finish the workout and then it's like, right, got to drop the kids off at sport. I got to get to work. I got to get the groceries. I got to do this. I got to do that. And there's no time to adapt to the training. So, we've found the need for at least a moderate amount of cool down is necessary in our workouts, because people are simply otherwise not going to realize the growth from the workout they just did.
I've found being committed to doing some mobility, and not rushing through it, actually sort of being in process, doing some mobility before my lifting. And I'm not doing my meditation in the morning anymore. I'm doing it, which I'd always done for years. I now do it at the end of my workout. I found that has been really beneficial to basically stop me from rushing from training back into work. I'm much more likely to go for a walk or just chill out for a bit. And it's been really good for everything, for my productivity as well. Because if I do go back in and do a couple of extra hours work after my training, because I train in the mid-morning or late morning typically, I'm that much more productive because I'm back on, whereas before I was rushing into things.
Yeah, it's terrible. You know, I've been as bad as it gets. You know, checking emails between sets, that sort of thing, and it's just ridiculous. It really is. And I got sucked into that hole in a major way. So yeah, that's something I've been working very hard on.
Have you found that getting into meditation has helped with that, being more present in what you're doing?
Yeah, and it's funny because I meditated from a very early age, much like yourself. Not quite as early, but through my martial arts. And it was something, you know, to my sorrow, I didn't continue, and have just sort of sporadically tried to bring back over the last few years. I'm currently on the best run I have been in ages. And again, just a growing awareness of how important it is. But I've found a different sort of meditation through movement flow. So I guess I've been practicing mindfulness pretty regularly for a long time. But only recently have I been working harder on actual meditation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So given that, what, obviously I could ask the typical questions about who inspired you in fitness and things like that, but I think what I really want to know more is what non-fitness books have you read that have really influenced you, or who have you followed in the sort of non-fitness fields who's really been an inspiration to you?
It's a good question. Probably Yuval Harari's been someone I've read a lot of.
Yeah.
He's got some, you know, just love Sapiens, Homo Deus, the 21 lessons for the 21st century or something like that. Just phenomenal thinker. Taleb, what am I saying? What's his book? Anti-Fragile.
Okay. I don't know that one.
Nassim Taleb. Black Swan, Anti-Fragile. There's some interesting stuff. It's just a play on resilience, where basically instead of talking resilience, if you're anti-fragile, when you become stronger as a result of the stressor, whereas the resilience, you're just resisting the stressor. But if you have an anti-fragile system, it's the what doesn't kill you makes you stronger kind of thing. So there's some interesting philosophy in there. And I've just been reading a lot of stuff around sort of developmental culture, as a gym owner, as a leader, as a boss. That's something that I really want to be better at, and providing an organization where my staff and myself continually growing, because it's a tough industry. Once again, there's a lot of stagnation. People don't stay in the industry very long, and if I can do something towards improving that, I will certainly try. And part of that, I think, is providing challenge and growth and support and a feeling of team, that sort of thing. So there's that book is the particular one that stands out. It's called An Everyone Culture. Robert Keegan. Just fascinating, and it highlights a few really interesting companies. One of which is Ray Dalio Principles. Yeah, his company is mentioned quite a lot in that. And just fascinating the way things are run in there. Like one particular example that jumps out is if you're having a meeting and you mention anybody in that company's name, they need to be informed about it, and they could listen to the transcripts of that meeting.
Huh.
Yeah. So just that is that brutal, open honesty. That's one of their one of their parts of their culture. Just things like that I find really fascinating, because we're constantly kind of that typical office corporate culture where everyone's sort of skulking around, hiding, and just trying to do their job, keep their head down, and not get made redundant. And it's not a fun place to be.
And the health and fitness industries have, probably surprises people who are listening in who are not involved in the industry, sort of behind the scenes, but they're well known for being quite, I don't think I can use the term bitchy anymore, can I?
Probably not. But yeah, I certainly know what you mean.
And the culture in businesses and health and fitness has not always been the healthiest either. I mean, it hasn't been focused on wellness.
Not at all. no. So
I guess we need to
we want to try and work on
exercise leadership in that area.
Yeah, and it's hard. I'll tell you what, it's a struggle. But what's the alternative, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what are you most focused on nowadays? Have you got any sort of big projects coming up, or what are you working on at the moment?
Still trying to make our little gym the best gosh darn gym in the country.
Yeah, you're doing a good job.
That's a never-ending process, but I'm not going to give up there. And I'm enjoying working with a few other gyms, helping them implement my programming philosophy. I think that's obviously you want to bring about some change. You can do a certain amount in a gym, but if I can get other gyms, other coaches, other leaders on board with, the delivery of more moderate and practical strength and conditioning training for the 21st century human, then I'll be able to get a bit more reach. So that's something that's sort of becoming a side business in its own right, and I'd certainly like to see that grow, if for nothing, no other reason than to have a bit more impact in that department. I feel like it's what I've ranted about the most in this talk today, and so that's certainly something that I'm pretty passionate about.
So do you consult to boxes and gyms and provide programming for them?
Yeah.
And how do people find out a bit more about that, Daz?
If they popped onto Instagram, I guess, which is where all the kids hang out, and look for Sherpa.coaching, they'll find me there, and they could just flick a direct message through. That's probably the easiest way. Or
awesome. And is that the best place for people to contact you, is Instagram?
Yeah, or otherwise come through the gym, crossfitnz.co.nz, and get in touch via the website. That'll all find its way to me.
Awesome, Daz. Well, we got there in the end. We got you on. We discussed a whole range of things, two beaten up old muscle heads discussing recovery and health and happiness. I think we
there's a bit more life left in us, mate.
Yeah, I reckon. Well, you inspired me the other day when you said that you were what did you say? You were fitter at 40 than 30, and you want to be fitter at 50 than 40.
That's the goal. That's the lofty goal. It's yet to be determined if it's possible, but let's see. And
what I figured, I had an epiphany after that, and I had a realization that our physicality doesn't. It's going to change to some degree, but it doesn't need to change as much as people think. What needs to change is the way we approach it, because I think as we get older, we can't just act as if we're 20-year-olds who are bulletproof.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I guess that's where all these we continue learning, right? I think we continue to learn and grow and evolve and discover how we can keep moving forward despite the limitations of a few bust ups here and there.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that maybe the goalposts will change. So, when I turn 50, I'll be saying, yeah, absolutely, I'm fitter than I was at 40, even though perhaps the metrics won't prove that. But it'll be what I believe fitness at 50 stands for, or is, or what it lets me do. And I will probably feel like I have more capacity in broader areas, more resilience, that anti-fragility I was talking about. That's probably what I'm aiming at. And I will, at 50, probably consider that an achievement that puts me above where I was at 40.
That's a really good way to look at it. I think
again at 60,
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of reevaluation. I think for me to frame fitness at 40 as being able to, I don't know, lift 180 with one hand is not realistic. But for me to be more mobile, pain-free, and overall better condition than I was at 30 is more than achievable.
Yeah. The only way to win is if you're still standing at the end, right?
Exactly.
So wherever that is, that's the goal. So
exactly.
If you're still moving and able, you are fitter.
That's right. Wise words, Daz. Thanks for your time today. I appreciate it. We'll get your links up in the show notes, and this should be up in just a few days for everyone to listen into.
Always a pleasure to chat to you, Cliff.
Thanks, buddy.
We'll talk soon in person, eh?
Yep, definitely. Thanks, bud.